All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I have been going through and creating a series of video presentations based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. And I'm in the middle of talking some CSS here. So far, I'm in the CSS first steps, and I've gone through the overview, the what is CSS, and the getting started. So it's time to look at how CSS is structured. All right. So as the author is mentioning here, there are 3 different ways that you can apply CSS to a document. Now, there's everything the author says here is correct, but I'm going to try to put it into maybe a little bit more of a global perspective. The first is an external style sheet. Typically, you will use an external style sheet if you want to take CSS that you want to be able to apply to multiple pages on a website. So if I wanted to be able to apply the same CSS on every page of my site, I would put it in an external style sheet and I would link that style sheet in every page on the site. There's an internal style sheet, and that is when you add style tags, beginning and ending style tags, to your head section. That is designed to apply those just on an individual page of a site. And then finally, you've got inline styles. And the example that I give for inline styles is if you've ever looked at a little kid's book where they starts with once upon a time and the O in once is real big. So it's just going to apply on a page just to an individual element, maybe a word or a letter in a word or a paragraph, etc. So the external style sheet must contain a .css extension. You've already seen this. And you reference it like this. Now again, this is how I'm referencing it, but normally in a document, what you'd have is you would have a CSS folder and you would put any CSS file or files that you wanted to work on the site in that CSS folder. All right. So we've already done stuff like this. Now notice how they've changed this. Now the H1 will be blue in color with a background color of yellow, and it'll have a border around it. We can change our H1 so it looks like that. No big thing one way or the other. So here was our H1, which was red, and now it'll be blue. And let's get rid of this thing that we put at the end here, where this special thing. All right, so let's get rid of that. All righty. And then we'll jump back over to here and here. And again, as I said to you, immediate feedback. Boom. All right. Now, this also shows something else that's interesting here, and that is the fact that a paragraph is a block element. Because even though the paragraph only goes up to here, the block covers the entire thing here. The block actually ends over here. All right. And remember that we added some margin or padding or both at the beginning, and that's why that is pushed over a little bit. Otherwise, it'd be even less than that. So we could actually cut that back down now because that star that we have in there, I've changed the size. Let's set that back to what we had before, 0.5. And let's see, once we do that, if this gets bigger. All right, and you can see that indeed it did. All right, it now stretches out except for about 8 pixels on each side. All right. The href attribute, as it says, needs to reference a file on your system, and you must give it the correct path. If you don't give it the correct path, so for instance, remember on ours, it comes in here and it just says styles.css. Well, what if I didn't put it into a styles folder, but I thought I had? So this doesn't exist. So right now, it won't find this file. What is that going to do to the way this looks? It's going to remove every bit of CSS I put into it. All right, so it looks pretty much like it did to begin with. Coming back in there and just removing that CSS slash in there. Actually, I think I can leave the slash if I want to, because that means from the root. I think that that'll take that and it'll still work. Nope, didn't like that either. So get rid of the slash. And now it's back to the way we wanted it. Okay, all right. With an internal style sheet, that's when you add these style tags. So let's put an internal style sheet in here. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Well, let's go into here, and in our head section, you can do it before or after this. It shouldn't matter. But I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say style. There's my beginning. There's my end. And what do we want to do in here? We'll say something we haven't touched yet. How about this second paragraph right here? We'll add something new in here. How about that? Let's add an ordered list. So I'm going to come in here and it's just going to say first element, second element, third element, okay? All right, so when I come back, and there's been no CSS applied to this yet. So when I come back and look at that, that's what I just added. First element, second element, third element. Not sure, I thought I made that an OL. I did. But it is still being grabbed by, oh, because those are all LIs. Okay, that's fine. So let's put here, let's see if we put in UL space LI, if that removes them from here. And this should say 1, 2, 3. And there you go. So who cares? Well, I'm going to put some styling in here, but I'm going to use an internal style. So I'm going to say in here, all of my OLs, all of my list items inside of an OL, I want them to have a color of red and a background. You can say either background or background color of gray. Okay. Now we could have taken this and put it into our external style sheet as well. There's really not any difference. But notice the difference. You can also tell by looking at this too that list items are also block level items. Just like this is a block level item, I may have foolishly said inline before, but it's a block level item. Takes up the entire block, so do these. What if we don't want this to be as wide as it is? All right, so I want it maybe just to be to about here, just as an example, okay? So I can also come in here and say something like, I want the width of these to, let's say, 30%. I don't know what would be a good number, but that's just the number I chose very randomly. So I come in here. There you go. All right, so there's a lot of different things that I could come in and I could do with this. All right. The inline styles is if you want to change an element. It's recommended that you don't use these ever. And I'm not saying like, oh, just once in a while. No, that you never use these. But I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add this just so you can see it. All right, and I'm not going to use their example exactly, but I'm just going to change it around a little bit. So let's see. Right now it says I am a level 1 heading. See that? So I'm going to put in here span. And then I'm going to say style equals, not color red. I'm going to say font size 1.5 rem. And I'm going to end the span. All right, what did that do? Let's look at it, and then we can come back and break it back down if you'd like. All right, so this I that's in here, is this going to change? Well, it actually got smaller because I forgot it was inside of an H1. So let's make this 3.5. See that? So that is inline CSS. So I'm just changing an element that's on the page. The reason that it's recommended that you do this as little as possible, and ideally not at all, is it's not best practice. As it says, it's the least efficient implementation. One styling change might require multiple edits. Second, this is the big thing. What we're trying to do is we are trying to not mix or put CSS into our HTML. That's what this is doing. Separating the code, all right? So separating basically our HTML from our CSS makes it easier to maintain, and that's exactly what they're saying in here. All right, so playing with CSS in this article, and you'll notice I keep doing this because I promised I didn't want to make these much more than 20 minutes apiece. So it says for the exercise that follows, create a folder on your computer, name it whatever you want. Inside of that, create 2 files. Okay, we'll do that. And I'm going to get rid of this for now and this for now. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm just going to call it CSS test. All right, so inside of there, we are supposed to add 2 files. The first one is this one. Not much in there, but we'll save it. And this is CSS test. And my guess is they'll want us to call that index.html. So that'll be the first one. Yep. And the second one with our styles will be called styles. So this will be styles.css. Okay, that looks like everything looks like it worked. Here we are adding that style sheet. And what we're saying in here is the color should be red for our paragraphs. We do have a paragraph. So if I run this, it should say create your test HTML here, and that should be in red. Let's verify that indeed that worked. There it is. Okay, and I'll blow it up so you can see it. Okay, there's our start. All right. So it says read on and have fun. So the next thing they're going to talk about in here are the concept of selectors and specificity. I think I'm going to go about that far, and that should about bring this particular one to a close here. All right. It says you may encounter scenarios where 2 different selectors select the same element. So in other words, it says consider the style sheet with a P selector. This P is going to set the color to blue. All right. It says there's also one that sets the selected elements to red. So it says suppose we have a document with a paragraph that has the class of special. Both rules apply. It says do you expect to see a blue or a red paragraph? So let's come in and add this. In fact, we'll put the whole thing in here. Okay, so there's the whole thing. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to add this paragraph that says, what color am I? Now let's first think about this. All right, we've got a paragraph and we've got a class. The paragraph is being done using an element selector. The class is being done using a class selector. Well, the way that it actually works in here is the class selector, for lack of better words, is stronger. And an ID, which we'll get to soon, is even stronger than a class. Okay? There's ways that you can overwrite that, but we'll talk about that later. I'm going to expect that this is going to be red when we look at it. Well, or would I? Well, I was wrong. It was blue. So let's take a look at why. All right, it says the CSS language has rules to control which element is stronger in the event of a conflict. They're called cascade and specificity. It says we define two rules, but the paragraph text will be blue. This is because it appears later in the spreadsheet. All right. Did these both say P on them? If it did, that would be Y. But that said special. So I guess I am surprised here. Now, let's say we did this. P. And now let's say color orange. And let's see what color that actually is. All right, see how it resonates right now. And it's orange. Why? Because again, of where it actually ended up appearing in our CSS. All right. It says later styles replace conflicting styles that appear earlier in the sheet by what's known as the cascade rule. Okay. However, it says when you got a conflict between a class selector and an element selector, the class prevails. Well, it didn't. It says it should have rendered the paragraph red. All right. So let's get rid of this. I thought that one would have taken precedence, and it appeared as though it did not. So what we had in here was P class equals special. All right. And I would have thought that that is the same thing as saying this, and that would have been red. But when you looked at it, you probably noticed it was not red. It's blue. All right. The rules of specificity in the cascade can seem complicated at first. This section in the next module will explain this in detail, so we'll look at it again. All right, properties and values. We are at 18 minutes, so I'm going to stop right now, continue on in the next lesson.